All right. I think I am live here. Hello to everybody in the comments. How are y'all doing today? This is a Wednesday night. So far, Wednesday night has been working out pretty well for these live streams. Now, I have a new microphone I went out and purchased with some of the ad revenue that I've been receiving on this channel, an audio interface and a new microphone in hopes of making the audio better. I've been noticing some audio issues with this last microphone, and apparently, these little shotgun mics are not good to use indoors, and I didn't know that. So, how is the audio? Can you hear everything all right? More specifically, are you hearing it in both speakers or both sides of your head? I was having some issues with that a little earlier when I was testing it. Audio levels up pretty good. How's it going there, Alan? Frisch, good to see you. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak, I see you're in there posting all your stuff. That's great. Pastor Brett, how's it going? Good to see you here, brother. Who else we got in the comments here? Ross, good to see you. Mr. Ross from Silver Springs, how's it going? Again, I'm just looking for a little bit of feedback. How is the audio coming through? Is it coming through loud and clear? I bought this specific audio interface because it's got a button that I can press, and when everything starts to peak and go all distorted, it's supposed to like prevent that from happening. So I'm hoping to get some really good audio. How's it going, GD? Good to see you. The other question is how is the syncing of the audio to the video? When I'm speaking words, is it coming out from the video as well, or am I lagging behind somewhere? Would be curious to see how good that is. If that's good, hardly noticeable, then we're all set and we're good to go. Loud and clear, Ross says. Audio is fine, GD says. Alan, how's it going, Alan? How are you and your brother doing? Of course, he has a Canadian accent. He's Canadian, absolutely. And you can see my little Canadian flag back there. So some interesting stuff happening in politics today in Canada. Possibly some good news, but you know what? We're not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about textual issues. Let's go ahead and take a quick look at what we're going to be touching on today. But before I do that, I have my other computer here. Facebook is open, and I'm getting totally distracted. First things first, okay? I want to justify my thumbnail. Not that those of you in the comments need to be that justified, but on some of the Facebook pages, I'm getting a little bit of pushback because it said missing verse. So the reason why I said missing verse is simply because the verse number is literally missing in your modern Bible translation. So we're going to be looking at Mark chapter 11, verse 26. We'll get to that in a moment. And if you have most of the modern English Bible translations, if you're taking a look at that, you're going to read verse 24, you're going to read verse 25, and then you're going to read verse 27, and there is no verse marker for verse 26. Technically it's a missing verse. It's a missing verse number in the modern critical text. I would even champion the idea that it's probably a missing verse. So those are my upfront biases. Again, I'm not a King James Version onlyist. I tend to be a Byzantine text guy. And many of the verses that the critical text tends to exclude. Can I say exclude? I'll say exclude. Many of the verses the critical text tends to exclude are typically found in the Byzantine text. So there's a number of Byzantine text. A number of those verses appear in the Byzantine text. Yes, so that's where I'm coming from, and my bias up front, right, based on my own presuppositions and all that, I'm bound to include Mark 11 verse 26. All right, so what are we doing here? Take a quick look at the comments before we really jump in. Sync is reasonable. Looks like I'm in a good place. The new setup is working wonderful. So again, thanks to all of you viewers who have popped a little bit of money into the fund and for bearing with all of the ads. Because of that, I was able to get a few updates and upgrades for the studio. So that's wonderful. Kevin Hawthorne, how is it going? How's it going, brother? Yeah. All right. So that's settled. We're good. Awesome. Now I'm going to switch screens. I still need to get another monitor at some point. I'm working at getting another machine set up here. Way too much work to do for today's live stream. But I'm working from one screen, so if it's pausing while I'm going back and forth, that's probably why. So let's pull up today's verse. You're going to see me swinging between my studio here. There we go. All right, and the verse is Mark 11:26. I'm just going to pull that from the NKJV here. So we'll just read the first verses. This is Jesus teaching on forgiveness. And we all, right, forgiveness is like the quintessential Christian virtue, right? That, you know, we had to be forgiving. We're forgiving people. We've been forgiven much, and so we forgive much, right? So Mark 11:25, and whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive you your trespasses. And then the verse in question, but if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. Very serious. Forgiveness is a very serious thing in the Christian faith, right? As Christians, we know that. Intrinsically, we know that. So this verse, this is I'm reading from the New King James Version here. I'm assuming you can all see what I have on the screen. Pastor Brett laugh. You are a closet KJVO. Not quite, almost, but not quite. You'll see why. Anyway, but if we take a look at the notes here, we have a note in the New King James Version. It tells us that the Nestle Aland text and the UBS. Now, I believe this is talking about the UBS 3 and the Nestle Aland 26th edition, I believe, because that's what was out when they produced this. But it's the same. All the critical texts tend to remove this verse. Yeah, so we'll take a look at the reference there. Now, if you take a look at the New American Standard, we have the verse 26, but if you do not forgive, neither will your Father who is in heaven forgive your trespasses. And a little note there. There we go. Early manuscripts do not contain this verse. Okay, and that's true. Early manuscripts do not contain this verse, but it's just not enough information in those footnotes. As I've been kind of going through these verses, I've been sort of changing the way that I see footnotes in modern Bibles. They're good for saying there's a textual question here when scholars are questioning something, but that's about it. The detail provided is usually not enough, and this textual note here, early manuscripts do not contain this verse, is so not enough detail that nobody could make a right decision on that. And of course, in the NASB, we have it in square brackets. Why? Because the editors of the NASB believe it's not scripture. And so they're putting square brackets around there to say, hey, we're putting it in here but we don't think it's scripture. But that brings me to the NASB 95 as a translation. It's a decent translation of the critical text. And because it contains most of these readings, even though they're in square brackets, because it contains them in the body of the text, I'd be inclined to say if you're going to do a critical text translation, the NASB 95 is the one to do. I think even the LSB, the Legacy Standard Bible, has kind of kept that tradition, if you will. I don't know if I'd call it a tradition, but yeah. Anyway, so the ESV, if we pop over here, it skips the note entirely. This is why I said the verse is missing, okay? Because it goes right from 25. You read the text. There's no verse 26, and it skips right over to 27. Apparently, the Nestle Aland text does that, and that's where we get into the NET translation notes. But again, the footnote here says some manuscripts add verse 26, but if you do not forgive, neither will your Father who is in heaven forgive your trespasses. Again, the question of some manuscripts contain this verse, right? Well, how many is some? So if you take a look at Wilbur Pickering's apparatus, at this verse, he quotes there's something like 96% of the manuscripts contain this passage. So some is like a supermajority. Again, I've used the term a lot, supermajority when talking about these textual variants because most of them are supermajorities. We're talking like high 90s as far as the manuscripts that contain it. Now, I know the pushback is going to be, well, it's a later manuscripts, but we'll take a look at that. And it's not as straightforward as is often seen. So we pop over to the NIV. Let's see here. It includes 26 in square brackets, the number 26, but then it doesn't include It doesn't include the verse. So we have the verse number in square brackets, but it doesn't include the verse. So a reference to Matthew 6:14. We're going to take a look at Matthew 6:15 later. And again, same thing. Some manuscripts include here words similar to Matthew 6:15. So why is it saying Matthew 6:15? Well, because it's priming you, right? This is priming you to take a look at Matthew 6:15 and then make a conclusion that, well, scribes added Mark 11:26 because it's a harmonization with Matthew 6:15. I got to fly down here. Flies. They're priming you for a gospel harmonization. If you don't believe me, I'll prove it to you in a moment. All right. So taking a look here again, this is the NRSV, New Revised Standard Version. I typically don't like this one. Some people do. That's fine, whatever. But we're talking critical text. I typically find it's a little bit liberal, has some liberal tendencies. But it says other ancient authorities add verse 26. This is a standard notation for the NRSV, as I've come to understand. So other ancient authorities, when we say other ancient authorities, what we're really saying is most ancient authorities. And again, we'll take a look at that. Not very descriptive. And again, this is what I mean by the footnotes are they're just not very helpful. At best, what they do is they point someone to say, okay, you can go look at this further, but you're not going to get any details here. So NLT, we'll just zoom through these 11:26. I'll put me at the top of the chapter here. 11:26 again. We skip over verse 26, hence my thumbnail and title. It's missing, right? Verse 26 is literally missing from most English Bible translations. And the footnote says, some manuscripts add verse 26. But if you refuse to forgive, your Father in heaven will not forgive your sins. And then it pushes you to Matthew 6:15. So we'll take a look at the CSB here, the not Gnostic Christian Standard Bible. And again, it does the same thing as the rest of our translations, with the exception of the NAV and the NASB 95. Skips over verse 26 entirely. So the versification is missing completely. All right. And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him so that your Father in heaven will also forgive you your wrongdoings. And then boom, just skips 26 into 27. And the footnote we have from the CSB is some manuscripts include verse 26, and then it reads verse 26 there. Now, again, some manuscripts. What do you mean by some? If we said most manuscripts, I think we would probably do better with that. And then lastly, we'll take a look at the NET footnote. As you know, the NET is usually has a lot more detail, a tremendous more detail. And those are the notes that are more helpful. But for somebody who's going to church on a Sunday morning, they ain't going to carry this like 3-inch thick volume, which I have somewhere around here. Right? It's huge. It's got a lot of notes, and it's good for the notes. I don't particularly like the translation, but the notes are really good. Anyway, so we have verse 25. Skips over verse 26, doesn't mention even a 26, and then just goes straight into 27. And we have our footnote here. So the TC note says, a number of significant manuscripts of various text types, Aleph, B, L, W, D, C, 565, etc., do not include 11:26. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive our sins. The verse is included in most later manuscripts. And then it includes a few that... why they put Alex, A, C, and D, they kind of put in there as later manuscripts. That's not fair. That's not fair, because basically what they're saying is when they say most, they're implying here that Aleph and B are ancient manuscripts, and that's it. We get nothing. We have nothing at all from the Egyptian papyri. So when they say by missing out, right, by calling A, C, and D a later manuscript, which they're really not. We're talking 5th century. It's only 100 years later, if that, from Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. They're leaving a number. And this becomes really inconsistent when you take a look at Metzger's work, which we will do when we're done here. But you also notice... Let me come back. If I click it. Yeah, if I click it, it'll stay. There we go. So the verses included in most later manuscripts, A, C, D, Theta, F1, and F13. So these are your Caesarean families, 33, and the majority, and the Latin. Again, it's in other translations as well, other ancient translations as well. They're being rather selective here with their data. And I understand, you can't have huge lists, and most people don't understand that. But still, I think it's leading to an improper conclusion here. And it's not likely to be original. It is probably an assimilation to Matthew 6:15. Now, interesting to use the word assimilation because it's not a harmonization, as we'll see. The present translation follows the Nestle-Aland in omitting the verse number, a procedure also followed by another of other modern translations. So we can blame the missing verse number on the Nestle-Aland text. All right. Now that's it for our brief rundown of the different translations, some of the main I know it's not all, right? If we were to do all the English translations, we'd be here all night and we wouldn't get to the good stuff. So let's pop over. I'm going to go take a look at the comments. There we go. Nice. Good to see y'all. And we've got a lot of comments. I think I saw Heaven in there. How are you doing, Mr. Heaven? Hope things are going well with you. Let's see. Kevin said hello already. 416 GGG, how's it going? 416 is the area code for Toronto. Are you in the Toronto area? All right, Pastor Brett. Early manuscripts refer to Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. Yes. So far in the NET note, it shouldn't, and there's a reason for that. It's kind of stacking the deck when it does that. Let's see. Someone should update Mark Ward's site to contain not only the KJV and CT-based reworking of the KJV, but an RP-based, Antoniades-based, and Clementine Vulgate-based reworking. Yeah, that's a tremendous amount of work. Like, tremendous amount of work. Let's see here. Good evening from Lakeland, Florida. Kevin, yes, that's right, Lakeland, Florida. I'm just trying to find where I am here. All right, friendly neighborhood, Jesus freak me. If you reject Sinaiticus and Vaticanus, is that still true? Isn't it implied, though, in 25? Yeah, that's you know what, that's one thing I didn't touch on. I skipped the whole first portion of my notes here. Let me get through some of these comments here, and then I'll pop into that discussion. So yes, Alan, it was an update of the 95. That's the LSB, it sounds like. Heaven Jones, responding to friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. I'd not bother with Antoniades. It's interesting and important, but pretty unhelpful idiosyncratically. Yeah, as my understanding is that's a text based mostly on lectionary. So all the strange edits and stuff people would do for a lectionary type text would be littered all throughout that. I would think. Okay, that's just me thinking. You smell the burning. All right, not the NET. Swiss cheese. Okay, some Spanish there. Did I skip over a bunch? No, I didn't. Okay, we're good. All right, no brackets, no footnotes either. Nope. Despite being the same org as the NESB and claiming NAA 27 as a source. Tony, how's it going? Blessings to you too. Welcome to the live stream. Glad you're here. CSB is dropping off my radar also because of Psalm 8:4. Well, thanks, Mr. Dwayne. You're welcome. I forget what I'm being thanked for, but that's okay. 416, you are not from Toronto. Okay, very good. If you want to leave where you are, but only if you're comfortable to do so. Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak, as in Hebrew, son of Adam is used there to mean a person generically, but Paul uses it in Hebrews to mean Jesus Christ, the son of Adam. Yes. Get gnomed. How's it going? Welcome. Good to see you. You are partially late. All we've done so far is we have gone through some of the more popular English versions just to see what their footnotes are. You can go back and rewatch that at 2 times speed and catch up, or you can be satisfied in knowing that we've thoroughly gone through the footnotes in some of the modern English translations. All right. So let's go on to this kind of next part. The part I missed here is I wanted to discuss that this passage, what is at stake in Mark 11 verse 26 if this verse is removed from the modern translations. I understand that a number of people are going to say, well, preservation's at stake. Okay, that we'll roll with that. That's a given. We understand that's potentially at stake. But as far as Christian doctrine and all of these things, like what are we learning What are we not learning by removing this passage? Now, I am purposely going to leave aside the discussion of whether once saved, always saved is a thing or not, because this could potentially be a verse that impacts it, right? Like if you take this verse out, then that could be a doctrinal side of saying, well, we can be, once we're saved, we don't lose our salvation, or whatever. Okay, I can see that being potentially an issue. But I'm not going to discuss that. But what I want to discuss is the fact that this verse in Mark 11:26 does appear elsewhere in Matthew, actually in two places, or at least the idea of it. So in Matthew chapter 6, verse 15, we'll take a closer look at that later. But if you do not forgive men their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive your trespasses. It's the exact same idea as we have in Mark 11:26. And then Matthew 18:35, again, the same idea. So my heavenly Father also will do to you if each of you from his heart does not forgive his brother his trespasses. Again, we come down to the really, really, really important Christian virtue of forgiveness. Again, we forgive because we have been forgiven for much. And so it's not just in one place in the scriptures. So if Mark 11:26 is removed, and don't hear me, I'm not justifying the removal of it. I'm just simply saying that if this is removed, there are many other places in the scriptures which talk about the serious nature of forgiveness. So why are we talking about this? Well, because it's important. Again, Mark's going to be circulating without the other Gospels, right? Very early, if you believe in Markan priority. And this Gospel will be circulating without any like major doctrine on forgiveness or without the negative aspect of it. Now, again, are people likely going to take the Gospel of Mark alone on its own, even in the first century? It's highly, highly debatable, maybe for a very, very short period of time. But nonetheless, today, it really doesn't impact our doctrine of forgiveness. We know that forgiveness is important. That's just the way it is. Now, so again, trying to justify, why is this important? Well, just simply because if it's God's word, it's God's word, and it ought to be in there. Again, repeating something over and over again, especially in multiple places, tends to lend to a certain importance of something. And so when we're looking at the idea of forgiveness and the penalty for not forgiving, whether you believe that's from an unrepentant heart or someone who is losing their salvation, right? I don't care too much about that discussion here. It's important, and we know that. So at worst, we could be slightly weakening this the consequences of unforgiveness, and that's at worst. So when we talk about the ideas being preserved, they certainly are. These words, well, that's a little bit of a different story. So anyway, we're talking about this because it's interesting, and I think it's important. All right, now let's pop over there. Comments, where are we doing here? Psalm 8:4, Hebrews 2:6. So we're talking about the CSB. I'm here, been having trouble catching live streams, but finally managed to get on one. Soldier of Christ, good to see you here. Look through the footnotes, caught a bunion. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe it's just me being Canadian and not having a full grasp of idioms around the world. Where are you from, Colin? Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak laughed. It seems to flow better with Mark 11, to be honest. With 11:26, right? It seems rather abrupt when it cuts off. Soldier of Christ. I'm probably one of the few Matthean priority people left. I think there's a few. Do you think it's Hebrew also? Not written in Greek? Matthean priority just means that the Gospel of Matthew was written before the other Gospels. Jesus freak, yeah, there we go. John Bunyan. Yeah, I know who John Bunyan is, but I don't understand the reference. That's okay. It's the belief. Yeah, he's explaining it. All right, and well, I agree with you, so that makes two. Well, there we go. Get gnomed. It's a very cringe position. All right. Okay, all right, we're moving on. Okay, so what I want to do now is I want to take a look at the commentaries that I think kind of spurned this discussion on. So before we do that, I'll just pop into the commentary. Let me change over my screen here so you can see what we're doing. So this is Bruce Metzger's commentary. And he comments on this verse. I think he comments on just about every one of those 16 verses. So for 1126, his entry is, although it might be thought that the sentence was accidentally omitted because of Homoeoteleuton, that's similar endings. And we'll see that. There's a really good example in Alexandrinus. Thanks to James for pointing that out. But its absence from early witnesses that represent all text types. Okay, this is a very important claim here. Absence from early witnesses that represent all text types makes it highly probable that the words were inserted by copyists in imitation of Matthew 6:15. Okay, remember I was telling you about priming you for this idea of a gospel harmonization. Well, that comes from here, from Metzger's commentary. So he's saying, well, it's very similar to Matthew 6:15. So a scribe came to Mark 11:26. Or came to the end of Mark 11:25 and thought that he needed to add this. Okay, so that's Metzger's position. There's a number of issues with that, but I want to touch on, first of all, that he states, although it might be thought that the sentence was accidentally omitted because of Homoeoteleuton, right? He recognizes, Metzger is recognizing here that Homoeoteleuton, it looks like Homoeoteleuton could have been a reason for the removal of Mark 11:26. Yes, I know I'm using the term removed and missing. You're just going to have to get used to it. All right. And so Homoeoteleuton, he's recognizing that that's potentially a thing here. But then he says, right, this is what changes Metzger's mind here, is that it's not it. All of the early witnesses with all of the text types don't have this. That's his claim, and that's a very, very important claim. So before we get into that, what I want to do is I first want to take a look at his claim that it's an imitation of Matthew 6:15. Okay, so I have made a PowerPoint to make it easier for this. Okay, so these are the two verses. So we got Matthew 11:26 on the top. I'm just going to check and make sure we're still good. All right, so we got Matthew 11:26 on the top. Okay, and this is the Greek text. Idei mis uk aphiete udeo patirimon hoentisurenis aphisi taperiptometaimon. Okay, that's it's fun to read Greek. So that's Mark 11:26. This is the one we're looking at that's missing. And then Matthew 6:15 is eande mi aphite tis anthropis ta periptometa avton udeo patirimon aphisi ta periptometaimon. Okay, so the problem here, right? The issue with claiming that it is a harmonization, right? Now, I don't think he actually uses the word harmonization there, and the NET uses the word assimilation, right? Because they know that this can't be a gospel harmonization because it is so incredibly different, right? So you can see the differences between the two verses that are claimed to be copied, right? So we begin with the particle e instead of aeon. Imis uk ephiete. We have a different phrase there. Mi ephiete. Again, we have the second person pronoun explicit here and implicit in the verb. This, I believe, is a indicative verb. This is a subjunctive verb. It's a different conditional clause, beginning with aeon and the subjunctive versus aeon in the indicative. So it's very different. If they're coming off their mind, remembering Matthew 6:15 and popping it in there, then they did a terrible job. So I've underlined this portion here because anthropis taperitomena avton. That is actually not in the verse in Mark 11:26, like at all. It's not there. It is in the second part of the verse, but not in the first part of the verse. Again, you come to Mark 11:26, hoentis uranis, who is in heaven, is not in Matthew 6:15. So again, if this is a harmonization, it's not a very good one. And this is why I think the NET chooses to prefer the term assimilation instead of harmonization. So this whole idea of harmonize Mark 11:26, the end of Mark 11:25 with Matthew 6:15, it's not there. It's not a harmonization. So with that being said, it's worth, let me see here. Yeah, it's worth looking at his claims that the, what is it here? that it's absent from early witnesses that represent all text types. Now keep that in mind. Okay, keep that in mind. Now I'm gonna pause that for a second, and we'll pop over the comments really quick, and then we'll continue on. I made a nice spreadsheet. Again, I'm a nerd. I did software development. In fact, I did VBA development for years. So whether or not Excel is a great tool for it, it has become the hammer with which I do everything. All right. Geckonomes is laughing at the not seriousness of methane priority. I don't know. I don't have a position on that. But it is interesting. I mean, if we go back here and claim that this is going to be a gospel harmonization, it's interesting from a Markan priority position that it would be copied from Matthew 6. Anyway, I'll pop that down here. I meant the secular position, LOLMB, for making it sound ambiguous. RP, thanks. Bruce Metzger was so confused he gave birth to children like Bart Ehrman. Yeah, I don't know if I would call it confusion. If we're charitable here, I would just assume that Bruce Metzger was working with the data that he had. I don't think he had everything that we have today. Especially as we take a look at this text types thing, because as we've come to know, and if you've been watching the channel, text types are kind of going the way of the dinosaur. But that does have a piece in this discussion. So a bunion, I spelled it wrong originally, as a foot condition. Yeah, that's funny. Footnote. There we go. Okay, gotcha. All right, Geckonomes. It's all good. I wouldn't have been mad if you disagreed with me. You made another pun, though, because John Bunyan. Yes. I do believe the entire New Testament was complete by the end of the 1st century, with Revelation being the last book written. Yes, I agree. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak. A lot of Eastern Orthodox hold to it. I hold to it because I think there is a good historical attestation. I also like the textual evidence that proponents give. I'm not sure what you're discussing there. Anyway, I'll pass that. Oh, it's always the harmonization response. Yeah. I do want to reinforce the fact that I'm calling it a harmonization. That's how I'm interpreting this being said. But again, as you have the words in front of you. He says inserted by a copyist in imitation, okay, or in the NET calling it an assimilation, right? But I'm interpreting that as a harmonization. I want to be clear here that they're not actually saying that word. All right. Net is run by the Borg. I think Dan Wallace was on the Net committee. Ross, thank you so much for your super chat there. And CPA, CLA, don't know. ECM, list of editions. Yeah, I took a look at the ECM for this one. This is where I got most of the data that I'm looking at. Resistance is futile. I'm not charitable with the ecumenical movement. Yeah, I'm not huge on the ecumenical movement either. Of course, it depends what you mean by ecumenical, because a number of people mean very different things by that, as I've come to learn. So Metzger worked alongside of Carlo Martini. Yes, he did. Dwayne Green, do you think there will be more Byzantine majority text scholars in the later future? I would hope so. I think so. All right. Okay, so let's come back to Bruce Metzger in talking about all the text types. So I want to reinforce that his claim in this commentary note is that Homoeoteleuton, okay, again, that's two readings, similar endings. We'll take a look at an example later. Explains this textual variant beautifully. I mean, it fits like a glove. But in this instance, Bruce is saying, Dr. Metzger, Bruce Metzger, he's saying that the evidence that in the early centuries or the early extant witnesses that we have, okay, of all the text types, they all don't contain it. In fact, he finds that so strong that he's weighing that more in his decision than Homoeoteleuton. And I know that people are going to be asking what Homoeoteleuton is, and we will go over that, but he's preferring the text type argument over the Homoeoteleuton argument. So I'm going to pop open my spreadsheet here. Yes, I went through. I'm going to catalog these and have a library of them, and then I can run some analysis on them. So I went through and looked at each one of these, copied down their centuries, like which century they're from. I use the there's a list on the wiki site that lists every unsealed manuscript and provides a date in there, as well as a summary of the type of text they are based on the 4 text type system that it's on its way out. And then I have a column here to say whether includes Mark 11:26 or whether excludes. I was going to say disclude. We don't use that word, but that's okay. I made that up a long time ago when I was doing software work. Disclude. Got in trouble for not trouble, but I got made fun of for that one. Anyway, so anyway, here what we have is basically 12 unsealed manuscripts pre-9th century that include the verse, and 6 unsealed manuscripts pre-11th century. I don't know why that unseal is in there. It's funny. That exclude the verse. Okay, and I copied down all of their text types. So we have representatives from the Byzantine text type, some with mixture, from the Western text type. We have one from the Caesarean text type. So with the inclusion of the verse, we have a representative from every single text type. Now, with the exclusion, right, the exclusion of the verse, we have Alexandrian witnesses. We have one mixed Western manuscript where it's considered to be Caesarean in the 5th century. We have an Alexandrian mixed with Byzantine readings, right? Another mixed Alexandrian Byzantine, and then a Byzantine commentary manuscript all the way from the 11th century that excludes the verse. Now, I made a few notes here because they're rather interesting. So if I break down the count, first of all, by date, you should be able to see that pretty easily. Let me just check and make sure. Can we see that? Am I cutting that off? No, we got it. Okay. The joys of working with one monitor. All right. Yeah. So if you take a look at this chart, we get an idea of the counts are of unseals. Now, I didn't include the rest of the minuscules, but we have an indication. I said 6. I thought I had 6, and I have 7 there. Maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I can't count apparently. 7. There's 7 manuscripts. I think it was 6 because I didn't include the 11th century when we talk about old manuscripts. But yeah, so if we come back over here, we have 2 manuscripts from the 4th century. We know what those are, right? Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. And then we have 1 manuscript from the 5th century. I think that was Washingtonianus, the 32. That's the one with the Freer Logion and a bunch of weird readings. And then we have 1 from the 8th century and 2 from the 9th century, 1 from the 11th century, total for 7 that exclude the verse. All of the Egyptian papyri that are typically 3rd century, they're not included because they just don't contain this passage. It's either lacunar, that is, it's damaged in that area, or they just don't exist. We don't have it. So you're basically looking at all of the 11th century, I should say 10th century. I really should just leave that out. It's surprising that's in there. But really, before the 9th century, or the 9th century and before, you only got 6 witnesses. You can count them. You can almost count them on one hand, right? 6 witnesses that exclude it. Now, if we come over to the Byzantine, if we come over to the Byzantine reading, it really is a Byzantine reading. We've got 12 manuscripts. We've got 3 from the 5th century. One of those being Alexandrinus, of course. Codex C, Ephraemi Rescriptus, and I think it was Codex D. And then we have 3 6th century manuscripts, 1 8th century, and 5 9th century unsealed manuscripts. Now the question is, does Sinaiticus and Vaticanus justify pushing this over the edge? Because there's no other way to read this data and read these facts other than Vaticanus and Sinaiticus pushing it over the edge. Right now, I want to come back to Metzger's charge here. Remember, he says, it's absence from early witnesses that represent all text types. Well, the next question is well, are all text types represented in the exclusion? So if we come back to our trusty little manuscript, our trusty little spreadsheet, I did a text type breakdown. So we have 7 Byzantine manuscripts that include it, 2 Western that include it, one Caesarean that includes it, and 2 mixed manuscripts. Now, we'll talk about the mixed manuscripts because they're really important in this discussion. When we come to exclude it, and remember, Bruce Metzger saying its absence from early witnesses that represent all text types make it highly probable that the words were inserted by copyists. Okay, so we have 3 Alexandrian witnesses that exclude it and 3 mixed manuscripts. Now remember, he says early witnesses. Okay, what does Bruce consider early witnesses? Okay, if we consider the 11th century Byzantine manuscript as an early witness, we could put 1 down for the Byzantine text. But in all honesty, is an 11th century manuscript considered early? I would have to say no, especially if they're considering Sinaiticus and Vaticanus early. Certainly they are considering those 2 early. So I don't think it's fair to add that into the early manuscripts. So we're left with 3 Alexandrian manuscripts excluding it and 3 mixed. So what are the details of these mixed manuscripts? What is going on here? So we're going to come back here to our spreadsheet here, and I left a few notes here. So our mixed manuscripts are Codex W. Okay, it's a Western manuscript. Mark is said to be Caesarean, but it's got a lot of issues with it. It's not entirely Caesarean. And Caesarean is one of those, like, what do you call it? Text types that were kind of debated whether or not existed long before we began talking about text types as a whole being abandoned. Now, if it is Caesarean, it's problematic because Family 1 and Family 13, which are considered good representations of the Caesarean manuscript, contain this verse. So we could come back and we could give it 1 Caesarean, but I don't even know if the Caesarean portion, and I don't think we really know if the Caesarean portion is impacting this specific portion of the manuscript. Again, if we come back here, we can talk about the next one, Codex Delta. This is that really cool manuscript, which is like a Greek-Latin diglot. But it is a mixed manuscript, and it's mixed. But then when you look at the articles and such, a number of people are considering Mark as an Alexandrian, as that portion of that manuscript is considered to be Alexandrian. So we push that into the Alexandrian portion. I guess we could add a 4. Yeah, we could do 4. Again, same thing. We come to another mixed manuscript, Codex Psi. It's mixed with Alexandrian and Byzantine readings. In fact, what's happening is the Byzantine portion of this manuscript specifically is said to be just barely on the fringes of being a Byzantine manuscript. But then someone took a look at Mark, and Mark, the Gospel of Mark here, had apparently tipped the scales in the favor of being an Alexandrian manuscript. So we could add another manuscript here for an Alexandrian witness. And so what you get here is another quintessential Byzantine versus Alexandrian reading here. And this statement here from Bruce Metzger is just simply not true. It's not true. Now, I'm not going to take the position that Bruce Metzger simply lied and stuff. I think he was just working with the data that he had in front of him. But objectively, the early Uncial manuscripts, exclusion of this verse is not represented in all 4 text types. It just simply is not. So now, when we go back to what he said in his commentary, although it might be thought that the sentence was accidentally omitted because of Homoeoteleuton, remember, he thought that the evidence of the text types favors that over Homoeoteleuton. And since we have totally debunked that, since the facts tend to show that he is very wrong here, we are left with the option for Homoeoteleuton. So what is Homoeoteleuton? All right, let's take a look at the comments. And we'll take a look at that. Okay, where are we here? I'm going to pop us over here. You can see all behind. At one point, I'm going to get a stream deck, and then I'm just going to press a button, and then everything's going to switch into the scenes that are proper and right. It's going to be glorious. It's going to be glorious. All right. So how far up are we here? All right. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak says, Just checked a copy of the Stuttgart Vulgate to see if it was added to the Clementine. Even the Stuttgart Vulgate, which is the Latin equivalent ENA, as I understand it, has it. Yeah, it's every it's every right 96%. The Diatessaron of Tatian includes it. I didn't know that. I didn't see that. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak. Not only that, the wording of 1126b is nearly identical to 25b. So I think Homoeoteleuton is very likely. Yes, and we are definitely going to look at that. The King James Bible is the Word of God, every word of it. Clapping in the background. I can take this book and correct the Greek. Oh, no, you can't. I personally do not know any King James guys who would say that. That's just like extreme Ruckmanism. All right, they're skeptics. Hello, how's it going, TT? Good to see you. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak, true. I said this in the beginning. Yes, you did, Pastor Brett. Yes, you did. Yeah, a number of people preempted my live stream post on Facebook. What skeptics say about the Word of God is of no relevance to the people of God. Yes, that's true. It's only relevant if you have an apologetics ministry and you are taking them to the watershed. All right. The modern critical text is twisted. I don't know if I would go that far. All right. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak. They say it's critical in the sense of editio critica, but they really mean it's critical in the sense of they're critical of its authenticity. So they want to tear it down. Yeah, again, I don't know. I find that to be a little bit uncharitable. I try to avoid that kind of stuff. The ends of 1125 and 1126 in the Vulgate are one letter apart. Yes. In the Greek, they are not even, they're like, right, they're the same. It's identical. And this is why Homoeoteleuton is such and we'll see. Well, no need to ask. Let me check. Check. I like spelling there. The Aramaic and the Peshitta both include verse 26. It's mostly probably just the Alexandrian which removes it. Yeah, Alexandrian texts support Arian readings, like in John verse 18. Yeah, I know I'm aware of the variant in John 1:18. I'm just not fully aware of its implications. We've been using it. Well, not we've been. I use an NKJV, so I prefer the Son there. But the modern church has been using Son in their modern Bible translations, the critical text, been using God there, and have not been coming out with Arian teachings. So sounds like it could be a case of the worst possible interpretation. But you know, at some point though, I should look at John 1:18. It's a pretty big deal, I think. Okay, it's not as close in the Greek as it is in Latin. Guys, is it true the majority text only uses 414 manuscripts, not 600 plus? Yes, that is true. I don't know if the number is exactly 414, but if you're asking the question of has every single manuscript been collated and compared with each other, the answer is no. 400 sounds about right. The reason we know, though, is because there have been a number of small passages. So you take the Claremont profile method, took a look at Luke's chapter 1, chapter 10, and chapter 20 in as many manuscripts as he could get a hold of, and they did come out with these groupings. So when we say majority text and KX and Byzantine text, we typically find those groupings work throughout these smaller segments. Again, the Book of Jude has been fully collated, and there's another method out there that has fully collated a number of passages, I think, in John. And so these are typical groupings of manuscripts tend to hold up. So when we say majority text, yeah, we're talking about, you know, these few that have been collated, but we know that based on that sampling, based on these other works, that sampling generally holds true. Jew in Greek is in over his head. How's it going, Jew in Greek? Good to see you in here. Heaven Jones, he may have been thinking of the versions as much as classical text types. Interesting. Versions are, even in the versions, we're going to take a look at James Snap's article on this in a little bit. Anyone in the chat, come and join the Discord server. Yes, join the Discord server. If I could get Gnomed or Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak, if you could grab the link and pop it into the chat there, that would be wonderful. I do it right now, but I don't want to start opening all this stuff on my computer while I'm live streaming everything through it. Daniel Buck, I think I called you Buck on Facebook. I don't know why I didn't clue in that Daniel was your first name. Mr. Buck, not Uncle Buck. Alan Bunning, CNTR interlinear doesn't print this verse, but marks the deletion as HT. What is HT again? Friendly neighborhood Jesus freak. If a mistranscribed that, blame my font. Okay. It's your font's fault. It's not yours. Never your fault. What is meant by correcting the Greek? By that perspective, if I got a KJV with the verse and a critical Greek text can't I correct it by reinserting the verse? Yeah, you could. I don't I mean, I could make assumptions on what a Ruckmanite position is on correcting the Greek. I would say, I mean, if I were to come at it from an outsider position, I would say every place where the Greek and the King James Version differs, those who subscribe to correct the Greeks would just say the KJV got it right and the Greek got it wrong. I think that's essentially what it means. Earlier, Arian said Jesus is the only begotten God. Interesting. I would be curious if you have some sources for that. Plug them to me a little bit later or put them in the chat. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak, Peter Ruckman actually taught that the KJV was new, original, and superseded the Greek. I think he even said it was inspired, like double inspiration. I think that was a Ruckman view. I bet some KJVs thought Jesus and the apostles spoke Elizabethan English. I don't think so. I don't think so. So if anyone talks about using the KJV to correct the Greek, that's Ruckmanism, yes. Ruckman changed toward the end of his life. NB, Christian, Palestinian, Aramaic. I missed something there. Homoeoteleuton. Yes, we're going to get to Homoeoteleuton in a second. Also splits in, yes, Syriac, Coptic, even Latin. Most of them are not Alexandrian. Oh, interesting. Yeah, I guess most of the Latin would be Western would be my guess. Again, I'm a little ignorant on the Syriac and Coptic stuff. But do we really have Syriac and Coptic manuscripts that are like superiorly early than what we have in the Greek tradition? I don't think there's a whole lot. Bingo. Most of them are not Alexandrian. The Ethiopian doesn't have it. There is no Alexandrian, if I recall correctly. We should still show love to critical text advocate brothers, even James White. Even James White. Yes, I don't particularly see the critical text TR KJV a reason to cause division. I think what happens, generally speaking, with this conversation is I mean, if it's something that bothers us, right? I mean, there's some people out there who just don't care and it doesn't bother them and they just continue on their merry day and they read the word and they love the Lord and they produce fruit, all that kind of stuff. There's people that just aren't bothered by that stuff. And you know what? All the power to them. Ignorance is bliss. But they go about their day and it just doesn't bother them at all. They don't care. So good for them. But for those of us who it does bother, for those of us who think about these issues, right? The best thing to do is just go away, research it, take it to the Lord in prayer, right? Take it to the Lord in prayer. And then you'll come out with a position and then defend it, hold to it. If something comes along and changes that, then take it to the Lord in prayer, right? Consider these things prayerfully. And when you're preaching and teaching, you're obviously going to use your preferred text. So go and do that. And that's fine. And that's fair. So I don't see this as a reason to divide over. So if you're like a TR guy and you're going to a church that uses a critical text translation, I wouldn't make it a big deal. If they ask you, or if you're given the opportunity to share on it, do so. But do so in a spirit of unity and a spirit of love. Because yes, our brothers who use the critical text translations and so on and so forth, most of them, as far as I know, are believers and Christians and love the Lord just like you do. And the blood of Jesus purchased their soul in the same way that it purchased yours. So, yeah. So that's what I'll say to that. All right, HT Homoeoteleuton. There we go. Perfect. Thank you, Ross. Marcario, how's it going? Heck, I tend to favor the CT in Jude and Revelation. Interesting. Interesting. All right. Okay, so let's continue. My notes just logged out here. Where am I going here? All right. So I have James Snap's article. Now, I did not find a whole lot on the fathers, but James Snap's article does. Let me share the screen here. Here we go. So he has an article on Mark 11:26. I will post that in the chat once we're done here. Go ahead and read that. We're not going to read the whole thing. It's super good, super thorough. James does a thorough job on a lot of these things. So right away he just right, he ain't pulling the punches. It's Homoeoteleuton. It's Homoeoteleuton. So he actually, you know what? I had the manuscript here. We were going to go look at it, but he's got it on his site there, so we can look at that, and that'll explain it perfectly for us. But yeah, so he's arguing here that Homoeoteleuton is the culprit in this scenario. So if we come down to Codex Alexandrinus, and this is the example he uses. I could probably make that a little bit bigger here. I'm using James's. I don't think James will mind. Yeah, so you can see here, ta paraptomata hemon. And what happens is a scribe will be copying all of this down, copying, and then he'll copy this down. He'll look away, okay? Just imagine the scribe looking away at this point, and then coming back to the manuscript to copy it. And instead of starting here, he sees that this is exactly the same, and he begins here and figures, oh, it's time to start a new line. So ta paraptomata hemon is exactly the same here as ta paraptomata hemon. So this is relatively common in textual criticism, and it's oftentimes given significant weight when trying to decide when readings, when a passage should be in or out. And so the reason argued here, in fact, we'll see if, let me just see if James touched on it. Hang on here. Right, so two small observations may be worth mentioning. First, Codex A's format shows exactly how first 26 could have been accidentally skipped. So we're seeing that in the diagram here. Ta paraptomata hemon appears at the beginning of two nearby lines. Second, in Codex D, the word hemon is missing at the end of the first line. So because the hemon is missing at the end of the verse, this may be a deliberate omission. The part of the copyist who, having seen that the repetition of exact phrase ta paraptomata hemon made the text vulnerable to loss, decided that the loss of the word was worth a reduction of the risk than a future copyist using Codex D as an exemplar would skip an entire verse. Now that section here, okay, I have to be honest. I find that to be a little bit of a stretch in explaining why hemon is missing from Codex D. I think we're making too many assumptions there. I think James is making a little bit too much of an assumption there. I'm assuming that if he is in the chat, he's gonna he's gonna object to my objection, and that's fair. But nonetheless, this is really good at showing why Homoeoteleuton is the better option, especially given what Metzger is saying about the text types. So although Mark 11:26 is not found in our two oldest Greek manuscripts of the surrounding verses, earliest evidence from Cyprian confirms the presence of the verse in North Africa in the mid-200s. Now, if we go up here, this is one thing I didn't touch on, is Cyprian is quoted in 249, sometime between 249 and 258, as quoting this verse. Let me just read this section here. So in addition, although Vaticanus and Sinaiticus are old, they are not as old as the manuscripts that were used by Cyprian. So Cyprian's using a manuscript from the early 3rd century that contains the passage in question. Cyprian served as Bishop of Carthage, North Africa, from 249 to 258. Lots of stuff going on in North Africa. I did a little discussion on Mark 16, 9 through 20, and the geographic argument, where we start to see issues popping up in North Africa. Another one was the Mark of the Beast, 666 versus 616. And 616, I believe, was propagated through the Donatists in North Africa, and we know that because of I forget whose commentary it was that circulated the reading. Anyway, so 258, during the persecution that happened during the reign of Valerian, thus his manuscript of Mark were at least 75 years older than Vaticanus and at least 100 years older than Sinaiticus, using the generally accepted production dates of 325 and 350. So in Cyprian's treatise, 12th, book 3, in chapter 22, Cyprian briefly undertakes the task of demonstrating from the scriptures that when Christians are wronged, we must pardon and forgive. He gets right to the point. So in the Gospels, in the daily prayer, forgive us our debts, even as we forgive our debtors, also according to Mark. And when you stand for prayer, forgive. If you have aught against anyone, that also your Father who is in heaven may forgive you your sins. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father which is in heaven forgive your sins. Also in the same place, in what measure you meet in that shall it be measured to you again. So we have what appears to be a direct quote of Cyprian in 250, right? And he's clearly reading a manuscript that's just as old, or probably just as old, probably older, likely older than he is. I don't know. That hard to tell. But anyway, so in 250 we have a reference to a quote to this specific passage in Mark. So we have versional support is taken here. He talks a little bit about the versions. Again, I didn't find much on the versions, aside from split versional support in the Sahidic and the Bohairic. The Latin tradition tends to be split as well, but I believe it favors the inclusion. And then the Gothic translation contains it, so which goes back to the 300s in Wolfila. And what else am I missing? The Syriac is split down the middle. The Syriac is often split with some of these. So, for example, even the Longinia Mark is split. What else? I think, I don't want to spend too much time on the versions just because the Peshitta version. Yeah, here we go. Other witnesses attest the 4th century text also weighed in with support for the inclusion of Mark 11:26. Codex Argentius, made in the 500, is the main witness of the Gothic version. We were just talking about that. About the time of Codex Sinaiticus was made. Codex Argentius includes the verse. The Peshitta, probably made in the late 300, includes the verse. The Latin Vulgate, made in 383 by Jerome, who stated that he consulted ancient Greek manuscripts to ensure that the text was well-grounded, includes the verse. Almost all old Latin manuscripts, the descendants of Latin manuscripts made before the Vulgate, dominated the Latin copying tradition, including the verse as well. And then Vaticanus, Sinaiticus, and Cyprian. All right, yeah, so anyway, long story short, right? Too late. We're already an hour and a bit in. I get it. Long story short, Mark 11:26, I think should be retained. If we take a look at all of the Greek witnesses anyway, we can see that its breakdown of text types just doesn't work. Now, Heaven in the comments, he's talking about text types amongst versional details. Now, versional ancient versions. There we go, ancient versions. And a quick breakdown from James Snap seems to imply that equally old manuscripts contain it. So again, if we use Greek as our measuring rod, the Greek manuscript tradition, I don't see any other way other than to suggest that these ought to be included. And again, I think it comes down, right? I know this is my interpretation. This is what I think. You can quote me on it, but you're quoting what I'm thinking here. Is that if you come back to our count breakdown, the two manuscripts being Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, if you remove those, right, almost guaranteed that the critical text would contain this verse. And so what that suggests, to me at least, is that a tremendous amount of weight is still given to Codex Vaticanus and Codex Sinaiticus. Now, again, I don't know why there is so much weight. I know most people would say, well, there's so much weight on them because they're early. But there's got to be a little bit more to that. So I have invited Dr. Peter Gurry to come on and talk about Codex Vaticanus and Sinaiticus, along with Dr. Robinson, to come and talk about text types as well. So we're not done with the text type discussion, and so hopefully we're going to record maybe next week and get some of the editing done, and then the following week have that out for you to see. So the main focus of that discussion is going to be text types, but I do want to find out about Vaticanus and Sinaiticus and determine, what makes this manuscript more important? What are we missing? Because clearly it can't be just age, right? It's got to be a little bit more than just age. So we're going to take a look at that. But anyway, yeah, so this passage, heavily weighted, Vaticanus and Sinaiticus is my own interpretation. That's why it's excluded from our modern English Bible translations. But when you really look closely at the evidence, I think it's one that ought to be kept. It's in the Byzantine tradition. There's no question about it. 96% of our manuscripts contain it. So that's that. I think we'll probably leave it there. I will pop over to the comments here, and if anything else comes up, I did want to discuss a few other things. I got a little bit of time. So I've been imaging with my telescope. The night sky has just been clear the last couple days, so I'll be out after I'm done here getting some more images on my telescope. So I might want to run out really quick and take advantage of these very clear moonless skies. But anyway, yeah. So let's pop over. Let's pop over to the comments. Excuse me. Where am I going here? There we go. There we go. All right, comments. Where are we? Okay, I put the text of the Gospels up there. Okay, Heaven Jones, you skipped my comment about the age of the virginal manuscripts. Where are you here? I'm going up. Yeah, Coptic is fairly early, but if I'm understanding this right, I think we only have a 5th century. Our earliest Coptic manuscript is 5th century. I think it's 5th century. I could be wrong. I think it's a Bohairic manuscript, I can't remember. But I think it's 5th century. So that would put it on par with Alexandrinus and Codex D and such. Syriac is early, yes, lots of 5th and 6th century. That's right. I don't think there's enough or serious enough differences in the CT to break fellowship. No, I don't think so either. Getting some thumbs up there. Haven't you skipped my comment? Well, I went out. I did in my summary. You're right. I did skip the comments in the summary. Versional evidence. I have to look at that a little bit closer. All right. Imagine Snap hopped in the stream. Yes, he often does. I'm surprised he's not here. I would be curious to hear his objection to my objection to his objection or to his conjecture. Yeah, there we go. All right. Colin retracted a message. Basically, my rule of thumb is this: prefer the longer unless it reads as a blatant intrusion on the text or has very limited manuscript support. I agree with you, Dwayne. Yep, a bit of a stretch in James' explanation of D, yes. Cyprian was KJVO. He just didn't know it. That's funny. Jesus Freak, I've always considered the length of a reading to be less important than how well attested the reading is by a majority of manuscripts that follow the church traditional text. Less important, yeah. Friendly neighborhood. Jesus Freak, I think of the Dewey guy's excuse for supporting the Vulgate. It is more ancient. Debunking the Passion Translation. Yeah, I don't feel I need to go and do all the debunking of the Passion Translation. I think it has been thoroughly debunked by Mike Winger, of course, and a number of other people. I mean, you can go and just do a YouTube search on what is it? Debunking the Passion Translation, or whatever. You'll get a list of videos. I don't think I need to enter into that discussion. It's been thoroughly done. In fact, Bible Gateway has taken the Passion Translation off of their website, which is good, because it's not really a Bible. It's a terrible sectarian translation by a single man under some very strange circumstances. That's all I'll say about that. All right. So Alan Frisch, but I agreed that Jude and Revelation are special cases. Yeah, so Revelation is a special case because its textual history is very, what's the term? Lots of variants, lots of things to go through. Jude is different, I think, only because it has been fully collated. So every manuscript with Jude. In the other scenario is also the story of the woman caught in adultery. So Maurice Robinson has fully collated that. Now we're still waiting for his work to be published. But it's fully done and will eventually get out. So yeah, Neighborhood Jesus Freak says the benediction of Jude is one example where I think a non-Byzantine text type may be superior. Interesting. TPT is on par with Joseph Smith version. And then Colin debunked Passion Translation, moon landing in North Dakota. All right, I'm not going to touch that. I am not going to touch that. All right. So let's pop over to James Snap's blog. Now there's a little bit of drama going on. I'm not going to say a whole lot about the drama that's happening, but just I think it's worth mentioning it and how to kind of take that. How do I get to his site here? Excuse me. All right. So what is going on here? This is a Mark Ward versus the King James Bible Defenders thing going on here now. Now, I'm going to give you a disclaimer, okay? I am friends with Mark Ward. I have discussions with him from time to time. I think he's a good guy. I think he loves the Lord. I think he enjoys the work that he's doing and all that kind of stuff. But he's clearly at odds with a number of King James Bible Defenders. One, because because Mark is one of those guys who is advocating for the use of modern Bible translations and is often seen as tearing down the King James Version, rightly or wrongly. So there's been this kind of ongoing dialogue between him and a number of people, and a number of King James Version defenders have been, from what I understand, removed from his Facebook, blah, blah, blah. Again, rightly or wrongly, I'm not trying to take a side here, trying to walk the line, because I got friends on both sides of the discussion. But Christopher Yetzer made this big discussion. He made this discussion point about some claims that Mark Ward was making. And then being kind of banned, is that the right word? Banned from his Facebook page. Wasn't able to get some of the errors, right? So anyway, I don't want to say a whole lot about this other than let's just be open to one another. I think this is, this kind of back and forth is just not, it's just not good. So I don't know. I don't know what to say, really, truthfully. Maybe I shouldn't have brought it up today. But anyway, let's just remember that we're all brothers in Christ, okay? That's it. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to go there. I feel kind of dirty talking about some of the drama stuff, so let's do away with that. I'm going to pop this here. All right. Okay. Alan Frisch. So there's only one Dakota. Catholicism may be why Vaticanus and Sinaiticus are favored. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the link isn't necessarily proven, because if Vaticanus and Sinaiticus were produced in the 300s, I think it would be long before Catholicism had truly become Catholicism. So I don't know about that. But Gekanome says, Dwayne, do you think the Shroud of Turin is real? Interesting question. Yeah, at first I was like, I don't know, it's just kind of like whatever. And there's a part of me that is also like, well, even if it was something like, what does it really matter? It would be kind of cool, right? It would be neat to have like this relic that actually is not just simply like a relic in the sense of being a relic, right? But if it was actually real, I mean, that'd be kind of cool. But even, see, the thing here, though, is like, even if this turned out to be an actual even if the Shroud of Turin turned out to be dated from the first century, there's still no guarantee that it's Jesus burial cloth. I think that's what the claim is. We wouldn't know. I mean, again, it would be really interesting, and I think a circumstantial case could be brought that it is. But nonetheless, like, what would you do as Protestant Christians? I mean, what does that really mean to us? We don't worship images. We don't use icons. We don't look to relics. So other than being a really neat geographical thing, it really makes very little bearing on what we do as believers. So do I think it's real? I don't know. I don't know. My mind has been shifting a little bit lately on it. At first, it was just kind of like, oh, yeah, 15th century forgery, blah, blah, blah. But it really appears to be something that comes from the first century. And if it's something that comes from the first century, it could. I'm not entirely opposed to the idea. Could very well be. And I think it would be really neat. Mr. Morano. Now, if we discovered a KJV beside the Shroud of Turin, that'd be interesting. Colin says, we walk by faith, not by sight. I know I'm going backwards here. Mark Ward got warded off. Well, I don't think so. No. Heaven Jones, snap online on another show. Now, there we go. That's why he's not here. He is on another show. So when you're done with this live stream, we're all going to have to go over and see what James Snap is doing. Or he was a bit earlier. Okay, Heaven. Friendly Neighborhood Jesus Freak. One issue with the NKJV that is not inherited from the KJV is Ezekiel 38, 2-3. Now, I just finished reading through Ezekiel, but I read it through in the KJV. And I believe that they followed a faulty text theory in their rendering, but the traditional reading is in a footnote. Let's see. Let's go like this. Let's do Ezekiel 38, 2-3. 2-3. Did I spelled that wrong, didn't I? I did too. There we go. Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal, and prophesy against him. And say, thus says the Lord God, behold, I am against you, O Gog, the prince of Rosh, Meshach, and Tubal. What's the error? What's the issue there? I'll take a look at the footnotes. Probably this one. The chief prince of Meshach. Is this what you're referring to? That's the only textual note that I see here. There's some other translation that do the same thing the NKJV does. NASB except 2020. It's the Rosh thing. Oh, okay. So is Rosh not a thing? Do I have the KJV here? I'll just open that here. Hang on. Can I open a KJV here? There it is. Oh, perfect. Okay. So it is Ezekiel 38, 2-3. I spelled it wrongly again. That's funny. Son of man, set thy face against Gog in the land of Magog, the chief prince of... Okay, I see what's happening there. Or prince of the chief. Okay. So, Rosh... See, this is why I don't... I'm just not up on the Old Testament textual issues. Some people like C.I. Schofield pushed Meshach is Moscow. Oh, okay, I see. Dwayne, you need a gamer chair. You know what? I had one for about 6 months, and I just couldn't take it anymore because they are so incredibly uncomfortable and cheap. The kids destroyed it in minutes, and I was kind of glad they did because it was so uncomfortable. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, so some people like C.I. Scofield pushed Meshach is Moscow. I don't know. I'm dispensational as far as how I would see the biblical overarching narrative. But I don't know about that. And I think that's where the Prince of Rosh comes from, right? Basically, is Rosh a proper noun or a common noun? I think it's a proper noun. If we come back here, yeah, I would say it's a proper noun. At least it's given a capital R in the New King James Version. All right. Okay. All right. I think that's where I'm going to end today. I hope you found this helpful. I would be curious to hear your thoughts. Did you find my discussion convincing that we ought to keep Mark 11:26? I think heaven. I can sense already that you're not entirely happy about how I treated the early translations, and I think I can see your point there. Yeah, with some 5th and 6th century early versional stuff, but it's even then I'm under the impression that it's disputed. And I don't mean dispute in the sense that we're disputing it today, but in the early translations we see some in and some not. And of course the question is, and this was part of James' article, is he suggested that if it is Homoeoteleuton, that's exactly what we would expect to see, is that it would be, we would expect to see this issue crop up all throughout the centuries. And there's a number of later manuscripts, even in the Greek tradition, where we see this verse missing as well. Why? Because it's, Homoeoteleuton. It doesn't just go away, right, at the 3rd and the 4th century. I think I'm going to leave it there. Yes. I'll check the comments here. Yes, but that's the question. Rosh can also be a common noun meaning chief, right? And then Heaven Jones. Yes, there are early splits. Yes. The possibility of Homoeoteleuton is a valid reason. Yeah, and again, I guess this is more a discussion for you. Would you not see the Greek tradition as really hammering this home? Because it seems like with Sinaiticus and Vaticanus really being the chief operators here, at least in the Greek tradition, we see everything else from the 5th century and the Byzantine tradition taking it and keeping it amongst its manuscripts. A quote from Cyprian from 250. Again, I don't know. If we take the position of the Greek text alone, that certainly makes the case. I'll leave it. I think I'll leave it there. Yeah, you know what? It would be worth looking at some of the versional stuff. I would be totally well. I would not be opposed to admitting that I need to brush up on some of the versional witness, because a lot of the stuff that I've been working through is mostly the Greek witnesses. Again, I know how to read Greek, so that's what I do. But yeah, I think looking at some of the versional stuff might open up a few other avenues. So something to look at. Anyway, all right. So it's not like Mark 16:9. That's right. All right, so I think I'm going to end there. Hopefully the video you found helpful. I hope you were able to take something out of it. And again, brothers and sisters, until next time, we'll see you around. For real this time, we'll see you around.